Sometimes Pokemon peak too early. They're amazing for the environment of an early metagame, but fail to stand the test of time. And a lot of these Pokemon feel like stepping stones for meta titans that would later replace them. Let's shed some light on these Pokemon that are often forgotten. Bulky ground types are a staple of competitive singles, present in every single generation. And when you think of a bulky ground type, I'm sure Landorus Therian is the first one that comes to mind, along with Garchomp, Gliscor, Great Tusk in Gen 9, etc. But the original bulky ground type was one that is now kind of forgotten by time. Rhydon was OU ranked in its debut game of Gen 1, and it served a similar purpose back then. And I would say that Rhydon walked, so all of the ground types that came after it could run. Rhydon has that wonderful physically skewed stat distribution that a lot of Pokemon after it would copy. It has a great attack and defense stat, but low special and low speed. Rhydon is also a ground and rock type Pokemon, which back then was a very good typing. Rock types were resistant to normal, and back in Gen 1 normal type attacks were all the rage. Ground typing made you immune to electric, and Rhydon was a fantastic switch against the popular Zapdos, completely immune to its Thunderbolt and resistant to its Drill Peck. This is before Hidden Power existed for coverage, so Rhydon was not worried about Hidden Power Grass. I think Rhydon was the blueprint of what would become a staple archetype, because it has this great combination of offense and defense. It can switch in against common hits in the game and then use that defensive switch in to output a bit of pressure. Ground is a great offensive type, and Stab Earthquake, even back in Gen 1, was a very powerful attack. Unfortunately, later in the franchise, being a ground rock type was completely untenable. Rhydon is known to instantaneously perish upon making contact with a mere blade of grass or a droplet of water. If I was ×4 weak to water and grass, I would probably have struggles with my existence as well, so I understand. But few Pokemon can say that they laid the groundwork for an entire archetype of dominant competitive Pokemon. Why do you think Groudon is called that? The Don is an homage to the original ground type legend. Everybody show respect to Rhydon, the one who started it all. When the Gen 4 games first released, there was a new superstar in town, and his name was Infernape. Infernape was an instant success in competitive, a direct upgrade to Blaziken that was faster, more versatile, and a perfect encapsulation of the new physical special split mechanic introduced in the game because of its mixed attacking stats and great options for both physical and special moves. Every sweeping new mechanical change in Gen 4 was somehow present on Infernape. This guy has Close Combat, the massive new fighting stab that is now one of the best attacks in the game. It has U-Turn, the powerful new pivoting option. It has Stealth Rock, everybody's favorite new entry hazard that has shaken the entire fabric of the universe. Infernape has it all. It's versatile, and it's got the best tools in the whole game. Infernape was very successful in Gen 4 OU, and to this day it still sees pretty common use in higher level tournaments. At the time, this felt like a modern mixed attacker and what that now meant. And it was an exciting time for Infernape. But could Infernape keep up that hype? Could it maintain its position? Unfortunately, no, it couldn't. While Infernape had the last laugh in Gen 4 and clearly outclassed Blaziken with its superior stats, Blaziken clapped back in Generation 5, receiving a far better hidden ability that buffed it to astronomical heights. With the new ability Speed Boost, Blaziken became the most powerful starter Pokemon that we'd ever seen at the time, and the first starter Pokemon to be banned to the Ubers format. This was an embarrassing display from Infernape, losing to a chicken, but now that he's banned, surely Infernape is the most powerful fire fighting type in Gen 5, correct? Well, yes, but Infernape's stats that were impressive last generation and its incredible options are no longer as special as they felt back then. Some new competition for Infernape includes Keldeo, a new legendary Pokemon who is far more fitting on the powerful Rain archetype and is generally just a better and more prominent and powerful offensive presence. As a stealth rock setting mixed attacker, I think that Garchomp is far more desirable and common and easy to fit on teams. Infernape is sometimes used in Gen 5, but not nearly as much, and it's starting to feel a bit outdated already just one generation later. And in the games to come, Infernape only faded further and further into obscurity. It was almost insane to think of it as an exciting new modern Pokemon. When you look at it by today's standards, it feels outdated and weak and unexciting. They haven't really given it any noteworthy buffs to push it back into the forefront, and it's sort of just faded away, peaking at its debut and never reaching such heights again, regrettably. I have always been a fan of Infernape. I think it's a pretty awesome Pokemon. I love a mixed attacker with diverse options. And I do think that Infernape probably served as a stepping stone for later similar Pokemon. The one that comes to mind is Iron Valiant in Gen 9, who is, of course, a way more powerful guy with much more overtuned stats, but fundamentally pretty similar to Infernape back in Gen 4. It is known for being incredibly versatile, with great attacking options that are both physical and special, a good mix of attacking options and utility, has options like Encore and Taunt, etc., just like Infernape did. Infernape was certainly a great proof of concept for what a mixed attacker could look like at the time it was released, and probably served to be a good drawing point to design future mixed attackers. The most tragic example, in my opinion, of a Pokemon that peaked too early would be the story of Haxorus. Haxorus is a Gen 5 dragon type that I think is quite awesome. A rare mono dragon type with the ability Mold Breaker and some solid offensive stats, a very impressive 147 base attack in particular. Haxorus had a strong start in Gen 5 OU as a powerful dragon type that could outrage through things and cause havoc. And this is an unfortunate example of a Pokemon peaking so early that it already became unviable in the same generation it was introduced. When Pokemon Black and White 2 came out, they released Kyurem Black to the game. And Kyurem Black was a rare box legendary that was OU legal. Kyurem Black ended up being basically a directly superior version of Haxorus. Even though ice typing can be a bit of a problem, rock weakness, this guy is so much better, so much bulkier, with a monstrous 170 base attack. Everything that Haxorus was doing, Kyurem Black just did better. And unfortunately, Haxorus fell off a cliff immediately after this, in a very regrettable turn of events. And the years have not been kind to Haxorus whatsoever, for goodness sake. In Gen 6, it was Dragon-type Hell, as the Fairy type was introduced. And Haxorus is a mono dragon. At least other dragon types could survive because of their backup secondary typing and other options they have. Haxorus was kind of all in on the dragon thing. And now fairy types are in the game, and what the hell are you supposed to do at the mere sight of a Clefable, for goodness sake? Haxorus is just an unfortunate Pokemon all around. It doesn't even have the critical acclaim of a Pokemon like Rhydon, a foundational Pokemon. I don't think Haxorus really served to inspire future copycats or do much of anything. It's just a forgotten relic of a early metagame within Gen 5 that nobody uses anymore. How terrible. I think they gotta give Haxorus some sort of buff. For such a cool Pokemon, it's a huge waste, isn't it? It's a huge waste. But at least Haxorus is more remembered than Conkeldurr. Who the hell is this weird clown guy with concrete? This guy was good once in Gen 5 as well. They're actually kind of comparable, aren't they? Conkeldurr is also a mono type. It's a fighting type, and it's notable for its massive 140 base attack stat. Now, Conkeldurr is very similar to fighting types we've seen in the past, like Machamp and Hariyama, but Conkeldurr was kind of a better version of them because it had access to priority with Mach Punch. With access to Mach Punch, it makes up for its greatest flaw, its low speed. Conkeldurr is pretty good on offensive teams in Gen 5, with its great coverage, priority, and decent bulk as well, with high HP. I remember thinking at the time that this is kind of the bulky fighting type perfected. It couldn't get much better than this, but I believe I was wrong. In Gen 6, Conkeldurr became a laughingstock. They started throwing tomatoes and rotten fruit at him, and pointing at him, and screaming at him. They said, "I hate you, Conkeldurr, I hate you," they said. They called him a weird freak and they told him to leave and never come back. No, I'm lying. Oh, that was all a lie, I'm sorry. None of that happened. He's UUBL ranked in Gen 6 and 7. It is a Pokemon existing in limbo, as many of these are. It's pretty good, but not good enough to be particularly noteworthy. And in Gen 7 in particular, I think Conkeldurr started to feel behind the times. We've got Katana in the game now, who has literally superior bulk to Conkeldurr and a monstrous 180 attack stat, but also has speed. Conkeldurr out here is looking like a doofus more than usual, with a measly 140 base attack and literally less bulk and 45 base speed. Truly laughable stuff. It would seem that the archetype of slow bulky fighter had more perfection to come. Conkeldurr was not the final form of the Machamps and the Hariyamas of the world, as later on we saw the unbelievable abomination Buzzwole come into existence, as well as Iron Hands and Great Tusk, and the insane fighting types of today. Conkeldurr no longer looks like a modernized take on an old archetype, it's looking like a clown who got lost on his way to the circus. Plus, where did he get that concrete? What's with that? What does the Pokédex have to say? There's an explanation, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's an explanation for the concrete origin story. Whoa, 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 it is thought that Conkeldurr taught humans how to make concrete more than 2,000 years ago? Is that confirmed? Because that is unbelievable. Conkeldurr had the concrete recipe? I didn't expect to get such a concrete answer to my question. Jellicent is a Pokemon that many forget was competitively viable once. This fella was ranked OU in its debut game of Gen 5. And it was really a unique set of circumstances that allowed this Pokemon to succeed competitively at the time. Jellicent has a lot going for it. It's a Water Ghost type, which is a beautiful typing. It has Water Absorb, which you can never go wrong with as an ability. And it has a very solid utility move pool too, with great options like Will-O-Wisp and Recover. And yet when you look at its stats, it doesn't look like a top tier Pokemon or anything. Stats are quite average, especially that 70 base defense being pretty unimpressive. Jellicent just happened to fit perfectly in the Gen 5 metagame. This was a metagame where rain was one of the top strategies because permanent weather still existed. And Jellicent is one of the best anti-rain Pokemon available. It's completely immune to water, and crucially, it is an incredible switch-in to Keldeo, because not only are you immune to their water-type attacks, you're immune to their fighting-type attacks. Jellicent is amazing at switching in against Tentacruel, blocking its rapid spin, and also being completely immune to its Scald. This is also a rare ghost type that is pretty good against Tyranitar, because Tyranitar usually won't risk coming in and getting burned by Will-O-Wisp. I always enjoy when this happens, when a Pokemon succeeds, more because of the metagame around it rather than its own fundamental strengths. It kind of reminds me of Galarian Weezing rising up to OU in Gen 9 recently. Galarian Weezing on its own is not that fantastic, but because it's able to defog against Goldengo and wall important enemies like Zamazenta and Iron Valiant, it ends up being a pretty good fit in the metagame. Unfortunately for Jellicent, the metagame would change significantly from Gen 5 to 6, and its viability immediately plummeted. There is no more permanent rain. Rapid spin blocking is less useful when defog now exists. The rise of knockoff was not very good for Jellicent, and its dark weakness and low base defense. And the prominent Pokemon it used to answer are also not as common. Now Jellicent is still fairly usable in Gen 6 OU. Spin blocking still has value, even though defog exists. And those unique defensive traits are still good, as well as the ability to actually threaten Tyranitar, which is nice for a ghost type. But Jellicent's descent is undeniable. This is a Pokemon that was OU for very unique reasons, and those peaks will never be achieved again, unless they give Jellicent a much needed buff in a future game, which I would like to see. I think it's a great and underappreciated Pokemon design that is very enjoyable to use in Gen 5 OU in my opinion. Flygon is another beautiful Pokemon that unfortunately didn't get much time in the sun competitively. When Flygon debuted in Gen 3, it was having a pretty nice time. Now you'll notice that its stats are not that fantastic, but it has a lot to make up for that. Ground Dragon is a great typing. A rare ground type neutral to grass and water. The ability Levitate is also fantastic, and it's its main claim to fame in Gen 3 OU.
With Levitate, you are immune to ground-type attacks completely. You're immune to being trapped by Arena Trap, and you are also immune to the damage from spikes. And that spikes immunity is the most important. Flygon set itself apart from other Tyranitar checks and rock resistances with that crucial spikes immunity, which is so valuable defensively that it makes up for Flygon's rather below average stats. Flygon was also a powerful competitive Pokemon in Gen 4 OU. In fact, it got much better from Gen 3 to 4. Powerful new Dragon-type attacks were added, like Draco Meteor and Outrage, which Flygon benefited greatly from. The new move U-Turn was a crucial new addition for Flygon, allowing it to keep momentum up and pivot. And Flygon found success in many roles as a choice scarf user, a mixed attacker, and for its great defensive traits that were already so desirable. Unfortunately, in Gen 5, Flygon would never rise to such heights again, as Garchomp became legal in OU for the first time, and Garchomp completely outclassed Flygon in almost every way. With its far superior stats, the option of Stealth Rock, and just being easier to fit on teams. Flygon may have Levitate, which has its value, but not nearly enough value to justify using over the far better Garchomp. But honestly, even if not for the existence of Garchomp, I think Flygon would still be struggling in Gen 5. I don't think stats like this cut it anymore, and with future additions like the Fairy type in Gen 6 to really punish Dragon types, and the power level increasing over time, I don't believe that Flygon would really stand much of a chance at OU viability. I think it's also worth noting that Flygon's Sandstorm immunity was a huge factor in its viability in Gens 3 and 4. In Gen 3, Sandstorm is the only permanent weather effect in the game, and Sandstorm is up in almost every game. Sandstorm immunity is incredibly valuable on a defensive Pokemon. In Gen 4, this is also the case most of the time. There is Hail, but the majority of the time it's going to be Sand up, and Sand immunity is just as crucial. In Gen 4 as well, Flygon is valued for its combination of rock resistance and spike immunity, making it very sturdy against hazards. From Gen 5 onwards though, this was not as true. Gen 5 introduced rain and sun into the weather ecosystem much more, and in Gen 6 permanent weather was no longer a concept. So that sand immunity that Flygon benefits from in Gens 3 and 4 is not as important. This is a fan favorite Pokemon, and a lot of players want to see something new for Flygon. Its stats are quite low for a fully evolved Pokemon. I think this is a perfect candidate for some sort of new regional form or Mega Evolution. I think Mega Flygon is one of the most requested Mega Evolutions. I don't think it's going to happen in the new Pokemon Legends ZA game, unfortunately, but a lot of people wish that it did. Raikou, when it came out, was of course an exciting Legendario. How could it ever be bad? And indeed, in Gen 2 OU, Raikou is one of the most powerful Pokemon in the format. Raikou is fast and threatening and bulky. It's got everything. It can abuse the powerful Rest and Sleep Talk combination, which is at its best in Gen 2. Crucially, it matches up well against Zapdos. They are similar Pokemon, but Raikou is a mono-electric type, meaning it resists enemy electric attacks, and it also threatens Zapdos much more. Raikou is extraordinarily powerful and definitive in Gen 2 OU. Unfortunately though, this was the peak of Raikou's career, and it would never reach such heights again. Raikou in Gen 3 OU is ranked UUBL. It's a decent Pokemon, usable on some teams, but Raikou really suffers from the fact that it has a poor matchup into various common Pokemon. Blissey is the big one. Blissey completely destroys Raikou in a 1 versus 1. There is also Claydol, a common ground type with high special defense. Tyranitar being everywhere doesn't really help. Tyranitar can usually live a hit and strike back with Earthquake. And then of course there is Dugtrio, the worst of them all, who is faster than Raikou, traps it with Arena Trap, and just one-hit KOs it with Earthquake. In Gen 3, Raikou is also competing with Jolteon, who has the more useful Volt Absorb ability and is much faster, crucially outrunning Dugtrio, making it a rare electric type that is not threatened by Dugtrio. In Gen 4, Raikou was okay, but I think the fundamental issue of Raikou started to make itself known, which is that mono-electric just isn't a very good typing. It's kind of plain, and it's hard to be competitively viable as a mono-electric type. In Gen 4, there is of course Zapdos, who is taking some of the electric type market share away from Raikou, but also there's the new Rotom, who is an electric ghost type with levitate, and that is just significantly better and easier to use on teams. This Pokemon has ground immunity, much like Zapdos does, making up for the biggest weakness of being an electric type, and it has that ghost typing so it can block rapid spin and switch in on fighting types and other such useful things that Raikou cannot do. Raikou is still fast and threatening and it has Calm Mind, but Raikou just doesn't do anything particularly special. It feels kind of plain. It's just a solid electric type with decent stats and moves. But it doesn't have any valuable utility or any fantastic stat like Jolteon with its high speed, or any useful immunities or much going on. It's a plain Pokemon, and plainness usually doesn't result in competitive success. Now what's kind of cool is that Raikou is ranked OU in Gen 6 many years later. Raikou finding surprising viability here. I will say though that I think that this is a bit of an outdated ranking. It's an OU by technicality situation where this was a popular Pokemon at the time Gen 6 was current, but in modern Gen 6 OU it's not as popular. But still, it's respectable. Raikou was much better here in a metagame that featured a lot of flying types in it, like Tornadus Therian and Talonflame and Mega Pinsir. And in a similar way to how Raikou would answer Zapdos back in Gen 2, Raikou is pretty good against Thundurus, who is now a new top threat of Gen 6 OU. Raikou, of course, resisting electric and threatening them with high neutral damage. Raikou has Volt Switch, and it also has interesting coverage options like Aura Sphere for fighting coverage, which not a lot of special attackers get. And of course in Gen 9 we have Great Neck, also known as Raging Bolt, who is one of the top Pokemon of Gen 9 OU, and it is indeed an extension of Raikou. And I do mean an extension. I mean, look at that neck, folks. Raging Bolt is a past Paradox form of Raikou with the incredible new move Thunderclap, granting priority. It's like an electric type Sucker Punch, which is extremely good. This is a bulky, powerful, special attacking wall breaker that is one of the most threatening and consistently powerful special attackers in the format. So they did breathe new life into Raikou in that sense, as it is the basis for this Paradox form. This guy also has an electric dragon typing instead of that mono electric typing, which is a much better type combo. Base form Raikou, though, has not had competitive success in a very long time, and definitely peaked very early in the series, as early as the second generation. Speaking of Pokemon that peaked in Gen 2, Steelix is another one. Steelix is an awesome Pokemon, in my humble opinion. And kind of a Pokemon that feels like a relic of the past, doesn't it? This was the first ever Steel Ground type, to this day one of the best type combinations you can get. And Steelix is defined by its massive 200 base defense stat. This guy was great in Gen 2 OU as an answer to Snorlax and the electric types. It was kind of perfect for Gen 2, wasn't it? Answering all of the top Pokemon very consistently. Steelix also had Curse itself to boost itself up, it had a Roar to remove enemy boosts, and Explosion to trade if its time was coming to an end. I think in a slow-paced metagame like Gen 2, Steelix really thrived, especially because it happened to match up so well against the top threats, but from Gen 3 onwards, it would never achieve such competitive success ever again. Steelix being so slow means it is just not as proactive as some other similar Pokemon. Swampert, of course, completely outclassed Steelix on most teams in Gen 3, far more threatening with its powerful Stab Hydro Pump and other options. There was also Metagross, a powerful new Steel type with fantastic stats and a powerful Meteor Mash and Explosion. Steelix felt slow and weak already. And although Steelix being able to match up well against Snorlax and the electric types was still valuable here, those shortcomings started to catch up to it. Steelix is just too passive, you can take advantage of it too easily, and in almost every generation there are superior options for defensive switch-ins like this. I think that Steelix thriving competitively was a unique case for the unique time of Gen 2, and it probably will never happen again. Not even the new Mega form in Gen 6 could save Steelix, as even its Mega form suffered from the same fundamental issues. It's always a shame when they try to breathe new life into a Pokemon like this with a Mega form and it just doesn't work. I think that the Mega form was kind of poorly designed, though, to be honest. Sand Force is a bad ability choice for this, to be honest, does not play to its strengths at all. It'll be interesting to see if they could buff Steelix in a unique way, but I think Steelix is probably just gonna be average for the rest of time. And finally we have Mamoswine, one of my favorite Pokemon ever, and one that certainly peaked too early. Because I would love for them to buff Mamoswine. I want this guy to be meta again, damn it. Mamoswine debuted in Gen 4, where it was quite solid. With one of the most powerful stab ice shards in the game, and being a rare ice-type attacker with rock neutrality, Mamoswine had its uses. But it wasn't until Gen 5 that Mamoswine really soared to the forefront of OU. In Gen 5 they gave Mamoswine a lot of buffs. Most notably the new option of Icicle Crash, an actual, reliable form of ice physical stab. They also gave it the ability Thick Fat to improve its defensive capabilities, granting an effective resistance to fire and ice-type moves. This really bolstered Mamoswine's inherent strength, allowing it to better use its Ice Ground stab combo, which is the best stab combo in the whole game, by the way. But Mamoswine also existed here in a very favorable metagame. This was when Dragon types were at the peak of their power. They had Outrage and Draco Meteor, and no Fairy types to stop them. Mamoswine's Ice Shard is one of the scariest moves in the game for players abusing Dragon types. It is ×4 super effective against Dragonite, Salamence, and Garchomp, and does huge damage to other fast Dragon types like Latios. By threatening Ice Shard and forcing Pokemon out, Mamoswine can earn significant progress against the enemy, with its fantastic Stab, Earthquake, and Icicle Crash threatening much of the metagame. But it's also punishable. It's a slow Pokemon with only base 80 speed, so you really have to position it well, bring it in favorable situations, and then initiate some mind games to get the most out of it. I think it's a beautiful Pokemon that is by far my favorite Pokemon to use in Gen 5 OU, and as I said, one of my favorites ever. Regrettably though, this would be Mamoswine's peak. That low base 80 speed is hard to work with, and the entry points that Mamoswine could find in Gen 5, as well as the common positions where it could output offensive pressure, just didn't exist as much in later generations. I will give Mamoswine a lot of respect though for maintaining a UU position for multiple years, and having fringe viability in OU in Gens 6, 7, and 8. Which is pretty good to be honest. But for goodness sake, if any Pokemon deserves a breath of new life, it is Mamoswine. Who doesn't like this guy, and who wouldn't want to see Mega Mamoswine or something cool like that? Who is your favorite of these Pokemon that peaked too early? Mine is Mamoswine. Let me know yours down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.